I'm going to bring in our next two guests with their very special host who has been fanboying up all week and reading, and that's none other than Whitewell Comics, Alec.
What's up?
And are you ready for the guy?
As ready as I'm going to be. There he is.
Hey.
What's up, gentlemen? Pleasure to see you. So as we just real quickly before we get into the whole
Hey, Alec, we're getting some feedback on you. Can you jump in and jump out and come right back?
Hold on.
I'll hang out with the.
How about that? Is that better?
Oh, perfect, guys. Okay. Thank you. This is Alec, and these guys don't need any introduction.
Yeah, I will certainly introduce you guys as well, just to make sure. This is Chuck Palahniuk and David Mack, two of my all-time favorite creators. And when we were setting this thing up, Chad kept asking me, well, who do you want to interview? Who do you want to interview? And when he told me your two names, I said, if I get to talk to those guys, I don't care who else I talk to this weekend, because I'm a true massive mega fan. I won't spend our whole time nerding out over how much fun this is, but I just want to say I appreciate all the work you guys do.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
So I spent most of this week kind of fine-tooth rereading Fight Club 2 and Fight Club 3 for this conversation. But I wanted to let you guys kind of talk about it first for a bit before I dig into my deep conspiracy questions.
Chuck, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Are you in Lexington?
No, I'm closer to Ohio. I'm right on the Ohio River at the moment. But
okay.
Yeah, we got to see each other on New Year's Day before everything went crazy in the world.
Yeah. How are you guys doing with this pandemic situation?
Well, my tour got scrubbed, but if it's possible, I'd like to mention at some point the stores that have kind of worked out a special way of supporting them.
Independent bookstores. That is definitely the priority for what we're here for. So, I mean, the floor is yours, whatever you'd like to discuss.
You know, if I don't mention anybody else, I like comics in Vancouver. I'm working really close with Chris to try to make as many people happy as possible. But later on, I'll run through the stores that I'm working with through the Midwest and Texas, and as far as Louisville. So please, later on.
Yeah, amazing. That was kind of the impetus for this whole weekend, was to help out local shops and independent creators and stuff like that who are, obviously having a hard time right now with their doors being closed. So definitely appreciate you doing that. So my first question is, in regards to when you decided to do Fight Club 2 and then Fight Club 3, what made you decide to do it in comic form? And were you concerned of that being a challenge that since it's so different as far as storytelling?
Number one, the movie built such a fantastic following, and the book did also. And so any kind of a sequel written in either one of those two forms would be compared to the previous one in that form. And so whether it was prose or whether it was another film, it was kind of doomed by comparison. The first one had built such the first versions had built such a legacy that it really needed to be, a sequel needed to be told in a different medium altogether to have its own authority. And so that was one big reason for comics. Another big reason was every medium has its own strength, and comics has a really, really easy consumability like film. So easy to get through that story. But it has a kind of lack of realism, a kind of wiggle room compared to film, where everything has to be made so literal. And especially in the case of Fight Club 2, there are so many really potentially upsetting aspects of the story that if you built an army of dying children, for instance, that was just not going to work in film. But it would work in comics. So that's why comics.
Yeah, one of the things I really appreciate about Fight Club 2 and Fight Club 3 is the fact that it doesn't feel like you were trying to write another book and just do it in comic form. You really kind of told it in a different way that fit the medium of comics, I think, really well.
And that's only because I had really great teachers like Cameron and David and Scott,
Yeah.
who really showed me the ropes of how to tell stories in a different medium. So thank you.
Oh,
What is the casting?
Oh, this is Inky.
Inky.
Appropriate. My next question is actually for you, David. From Chuck writing something like Fight Club, which is on the surface so hyper masculine, and a lot of the stuff you do is much more on the feminine side. How did you guys kind of come together to find this collaboration?
Like how did we come together?
How did you find those two? How did you find those two things to like meet in the middle? Or
I don't know that I don't know that I thought in gender terms so much about it, just more in terms of the character. So luckily on Fight Club 2, I'd seen the film and I had read the book.
Mm-hmm.
And Chuck and I had like a correspondence for a while before too. But luckily for Fight Club 2, I was able to read the script in advance. And it was just a joy, reading that script. And it was really, a full script, just everything was there. Yeah, so when I was reading it, it really gave me the opportunity to try to think of, if I'm making a cover for each issue, what's kind of an image for each chapter that I can kind of try to crystallize from that chapter into something visual, for the cover. And, that demonstrates the theme of that, but also is something that like I can put into some kind of physical form that catches your eye and grabs your attention, but also hopefully says something insightful, about the story as well.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like your work is always so striking when you see it on the stands. And I was also kind of curious about, your work has changed so much over the last 25 years. And has that been an intentional metamorphosis, or is that something that you've kind of just let happen more organically?
It's probably both. And I think a part of it is just every time I'm doing a project, I'm trying to think in terms of that particular project. So I'm not so much thinking that I'm trying to make each project like I'm not trying to manufacture a certain style and then stamp that on every project. I kind of feel like I'm kind of in a partnership or a collaboration with each of the characters or the projects I'm working with. So I feel like that gives me a certain liberty, to be flexible and just kind of to be open to what it brings out in me for it. So I kind of look at it that way. But, I can see how you could step back and like over time look at a body of work and see, the range and all those different things. And hopefully they have their own range because each of the projects and the characters were different. But, I'm sure there's kind of an evolution, to that as well. With myself, I try to make a conscious effort to, I like to have the fantasy that I'm improving, with each project or that I get better each time.
Yeah, I think so.
So I hope that's true. I hope I'm learning from each one and applying, you're kind of building a toolbox as you go. And so every time you do a new project, you kind of have more tools in your toolbox, a little bit more understanding. So it's part that, but it's also part that, I'm not trying to make them, look the same. I like the idea that, the style is going to kind of reveal itself, in the process, of working with whatever the project is.
All right. So we do have some questions from the chat. Hopefully we can take those pretty quickly if you guys have a couple minutes. The first one is from Joshua Pallas. Said, Mr. Palahniuk, such a huge fan. Your writing has deeply inspired my own and countless others. What writers inspired you when you first started writing?
I'm going to recommend short story people. So Dennis Johnson, his book Jesus' Son, So Dennis Johnson, 1N, Jesus' son. Tom Jones, Thom, Tom Jones. His big book was Pugilist at Rest. Amy Hempel, she's got lots of books. So Amy Hempel. Namie Moon, Korean-American writer, fantastically funny, heartbreaking stories. Namie, Nami, Moon, Mun. So that's 4. 2 men, 2 women.
Excellent. Next one is from the Night Nerd, who asks, Chuck, there's a part at the end of Fight Club 3 where a lot of artists are being held captive. Was there a point in Fight Club 2 or 3 when publishers thought something was too crazy and you had to tone it back?
No, you don't. God bless Richardson, but I don't think he really knew what we were going to do in Fight Club 3 until it was done, because I'm not sure if he would have greenlighted something so much of which took place in a sex club.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to do this whole graphic novel, but a third of it's going to take place in the raunchiest sex club you can imagine during a pandemic. And so I think that we got away with it just because people didn't know what we had. So
that's amazing. Next one comes from the Night Nerd. David, how different is the challenge of telling a story on just a cover versus sequential pages?
I look at it as a totally different challenge. I really look at the cover in the terms of, the job is it's kind of a twofold job. One is to make the reader pick up the book, or even more than that, if they just notice it online or if they see it on the shelf, even from 20 feet away, I want it to make them walk over to it. And I want it to catch their eye, and I want it to distinguish itself from all the other books next to it. And I want them to pick that up. The second part of that is I think of the cover as kind of like the doorway to the story, and in a way, kind of like what opening titles are to like a film or TV show, where you kind of want to put the reader in the headspace, kind of clue them in of what kind of headspace they might want to be in for when they read the book. So I look at it that way too. Like, I've worked on some opening titles, like I did the opening titles for Jessica Jones and Netflix. Yeah. And you kind of want that to kind of ease people into the psychology of kind of the atmosphere of the world that they're going to be experiencing. So I try to do that in it, but I also want it to grab your attention. So when I'm doing a cover, I'm not just thinking about what's inside the rectangle of the cover. I'm thinking about how it looks on the stand next to like 100 other books around it. So I'll do what I call like a little buffer zone, where I want like the edges of the book to kind of, I might leave like some white space or a solid cover, a color or something else. And I'll try to use like some bold graphic shapes so that even from a distance, it'll catch your eye. And even if the other covers around it have a lot of other things going on, I want it to kind of have a clarity to the shape of it from a distance. So you walk over and pick it up.
Yeah.
So, those are very different challenges to when you're composing the inside of a story and working on the panels and I'm happy to talk about that too. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we do have a limited amount of time with you gentlemen tonight. And I know, Chuck, you said you wanted to shout out some shops before we have to cut it too soon. So we'd like to make sure we get that in.
Okay, let me go. King's English in Salt Lake City, Changing Hands in Phoenix, Book People in Austin, Texas, Left Bank Books in St. Louis, Carmichael's in Louisville, Fountain Bookstore in Oxford, and Rainy Day in Kansas City, Prairie Lights in Iowa City, and Anderson Book Company in Naperville outside of Chicago. Those were all stores I was going to be at on tour with this, but I can't, so I am supporting them with whatever they want done. If you want something special, go to one of those, and they will come to me. Thank you.
Amazing. And so our intention is that once this weekend is done, we're going to cut all these into segments and post them. So we'll make sure we put all those links in the description of that video for you.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I can't really state that enough. And I have a whole list of questions that we didn't have time to get to, which I expected. If you gentlemen are ever bored and want to come back on and have a longer chat, it would be my pleasure.
Yeah, it was a delight. Thanks for having us on here.
And keep up the amazing work, and I will continue to be an amazing fan.
Oh, thank you so much.